Hi. If you are anything like me, you've had a very hard time understanding the coordinate systems used in Revit, along with the clipped and unclipped modes and true north versus project north. I finally decided to sit down and work it all out once and for all, and to create this video partly to remind myself how it all works, and partly to create a tutorial for anyone else that is as confused as I was when I started using Revit. In Revit, there are actually 3 origins with their respective coordinate systems, along with 2 norths. The first origin is the internal startup position, or internal origin for the program's internal coordinate system. This system corresponds to the actual internal floating point x and y variables within Revit. The second origin is the project base point and its project coordinate system. This origin is used as a reference point when creating spot coordinate annotations useful to the actual builder. There is one project base point for each file, and it is unique and isolated to that file. Project north is always positive y with respect to the internal Revit variables. And so that is why we are left with only 2 norths, because the project base point and internal startup point share one. The third origin is the survey point, and with it comes the real-world coordinate system and true north. Let's go back to the startup point and to the internal coordinates for a moment. First, you can't actually see the startup point in Revit. There are no 00 crosshairs and no icon dedicated to the task. Instead, the only way to locate the internal origin is to unclip the project base point, right-click on it, and click the Move to Startup Location option. It's not a particularly important origin, as it turns out, except in 2 respects. First, when you draw your building or your property lines, you want them to be orthogonal to the internal coordinate system, which of course is the same as being orthogonal to the project coordinate system, since project north is always positive y internally. Computers can't exactly represent oddball numbers, and by oddball I mean non-terminating fractions like 1/3 or irrational numbers like pi. When you draw a building rotated with respect to the internal coordinate system, you end up with a lot of these oddball numbers as the input coordinates of walls. When that happens, the program has a hard time determining when 2 walls are exactly perpendicular to each other, and this can cause some rather frustratingly bizarre behavior. For instance, ever so slightly changing the angle between 2 lines without you knowing it, when all you wanted to do was to change their lengths, and other strangenesses. Revit will warn you when it detects that a line is almost but not quite exactly horizontal or vertical for precisely this reason. So it's best to draw your building orthogonally to this system by drawing orthogonally to project north. Second, you need to keep your drawing within 1 mile of the startup point. There are 2 reasons for this. The first is that the Revit page you look at on the screen is like a 2-dimensional page pinned to the surface of the Earth. If you go too far away from the origin, altitudes and positions don't really reflect their actual earthbound positions anymore. Secondly, and this is a more technical explanation, is that while Revit probably internally represents positions with a double float, there is no way for them to guarantee that exported documents will not be used in applications that always use double floats. Nor is there really a guarantee that a Revit programmer didn't make a mistake and use a single float somewhere inside of Revit. And a single float only has 23 bits of precision, which converts to the range that's shown by this big number here. And when you divide that big number into 1 mile, you end up with a precision at 1 mile of roughly 1/128th of an inch. So if you go further out than that, your resolution becomes worse and worse. And while 1/128th of an inch is probably fine for most applications, the further away you get, the worse this becomes. Okay, so now let's move on to the project coordinate system. Really, this is just a point that is a reference mark internal to any given file It isn't shared between files. It's just used as a reference for spot coordinate annotations that would be useful to the builder. And I'll give an example when we actually go on to Revit in just a minute or two. Finally, there are the survey points. Really, I should say survey point, because in any given Revit project, and by project I mean a file and any other files linked to it, there is one and only one real-world survey point. And because each file has its own survey point, and because there are these things called shared sites or named locations depending on who you ask, you might think that each shared site represents a different real-world survey point, but that turns out to be wrong. In Revit there is only one real-world survey point. And we'll talk about that also more later on. But just for now, remember, so you don't get confused, there is only one real-world survey point so far as Revit is concerned. And now let's actually open up Revit. Here we're looking at a site that I have copied from a paper map, and I am looking at a view in which Project North is up. I've also drawn the property lines from the survey. You can see that I didn't bother to move either the project base point or the survey point yet. They're still both at the internal startup point. Notice also that I have put actually I haven't done that yet. Let me put a spot coordinate, annotate spot coordinate. I'm going to put it right here. It's a little hard to see. And make that a little larger. There we go. Okay, so I've put a spot coordinate here. It's currently set to use the shared coordinate system as a reference, or at least it would be normally. And you can change what it references by adding the type of the spot coordinate. So to do that, I'll just click Edit, select it. Whoops. Need to select the coordinate, spot coordinate. We'll hit Edit, Type. You come down here and you find, I forget exactly where it is, coordinate origin right here, and it's currently set to shared. And you can choose either project or relative. Relative I will explain at the very end of this. Actually, as it turns out, I created 3 different types, one for each coordinate origin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select a different type. I'm going to choose the project base point origin type. And because, again, I haven't moved either of these, the current position is 0, 0. And that's not a particularly useful coordinate in the field, because if my survey pin is up here, nobody cares that this coordinate happens to be 0, 0 relative to my startup point. And regardless, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually fix up true north. I drew this site so that this left-hand property line would be orthogonal to the project coordinate system. That is, this is positive y, and I wanted this line to be completely straight. This is, some x value, and this is the same x value up here, but the y's are different. And so that's not really north, and we need to change. So actually, first let's change the view to true north, because right now the view we happen to be looking at has project north up, so we'll change to true north. And notice absolutely nothing changed again, because I haven't set true north yet. True north is currently oriented to project north. I happen to know that this line is actually, or should be actually, 21.7 degrees counterclockwise, so I'm going to just type that in. And you can use the rotate true north command to accomplish the same thing. Ironically, even though it's the survey point that gets rotated, you actually enter the value on the project base point. I'm not quite sure why they chose to do that, but we'll just choose the project base point here, and we can say the angle between the project base point and true north is negative 21.7. Seems to me it would be more logical to set the angle of true north relative to the project base point on the survey marker, but go figure. And poof, we are now looking at the lot the way that it really is. And on this property there are 2 pins at the front. There's one here, and there's one here. And I'm going to decide to reference everything to this survey pin over here. So to do that, I'm going to make sure that my survey point is clipped. That's the project base point. So there's the survey point. I'm going to make sure it's clipped. It is. Here, I'll unclip it. You see the red line, and I'm going to clip it again. And then I'm going to just drag the survey point right over to the corner of my property line where my pin is. It's really important that this marker is clipped and not unclipped. Excuse me. Notice that the coordinates of the survey point have not changed. It still reads 0, 0, 0, and that's because the survey point was clipped to the shared coordinate system. And the survey point's coordinates are reported reference to the shared coordinate system. And since we dragged both of them at the same time, its coordinates did not change at all. The new origin of the shared coordinate system is right here, and the survey icon is here, and so its coordinate is 0, 0, 0. Now let's save this file, and let's open another file that I have called house. Let me just save that, and we'll open up house. Let me zoom in. Okay, so I just opened Revit and I draw a building, and just as before I have not moved either the survey point or the project point. I did draw a spot coordinate here referencing the toilet, and as you can see currently the coordinates are with respect to the project startup point. It's not a very useful coordinate to give to subcontractors. They don't know where the real world startup, or excuse me, where the startup point is in the real world. So it wouldn't be very useful to tell them that, not very useful to give them a coordinate that says -17 and -1 with respect to some random point over here. Nor would it be useful to give them the location of the toilet with respect to the survey pin. So instead we want to give them a location with respect to something useful like the corner of the building pad. And to do that we need to change the spot coordinate to refer to the project base point. So as I said before, I already created some types for them. I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to... Oh, it's actually, I already did this. I already set it to the project base point. And now what we need to do is we need to move the project base point so that it's at the corner of the building. And because this is a floor plan view, the point is currently hidden. So we need to click this little icon down here to reveal hidden objects. And we need to first unclip the project base point before we move it. So let's find the project base point. There it is. It's currently unclipped. I'm going to clip it and unclip it just so you can see how to do that. And I'm going to move it to the corner of the building, just like so. Now you can see our spot coordinate is properly referring to the corner of the building. It says 7 inches up, 21 feet right. I'm not really fond of the idea of project north. I actually prefer the idea of project up and project right, but you know, that's the standard convention. So this toilet is project east 21 feet and project north 7 inches. It's important to note that every file has its own project base point and that they are completely unrelated to any other file's project base point. So really it's just for creating these coordinates, these spot coordinates and spot elevations relative to the project base point that will show up when you create your sheets. So if we were not going to link in any files at all, if we weren't going to use multiple files, we could just draw our property boundary right here in this view. We could show this survey marker and we could move it to wherever the pin happened to be and set true north, and we could change this view to true north if we wanted to, and we'd be done. But we're going to take the more complicated path of actually linking this file to the other side file that we already created. So let's go ahead and save this file, and we're going to close it and take just a moment to save it. Okay, now we're going to link in the house to this site. So the first time you link in a file, the so-called shared coordinate system isn't actually shared. And that's really confusing because when you open the link, you're going to get this dialog. Oh, let me undo that. Let's see. You have this positioning option down here of auto by shared coordinates, and if you choose that, you're going to get this error box. Let's see if it comes up. Ah, it didn't come up because I already shared it. Normally you would get an error box telling you that they hadn't been shared yet, but as it turns out, because I've already done this once before, I'm not getting that error message. But at any rate, it can be very confusing because you'll get this error that pops up that basically says that the coordinate system is not yet shared, and so what it's going to do is it's just going to align the two components center to center. Okay, what I did is I paused the video recording and I've basically loaded in center to center. This is the way that it would come up normally. And notice that the house comes in rotated. The coordinate systems haven't yet been linked, so Revit just brings the file in so that the linked files Project North, its internal coordinate system, is lined up with this file's Project North, or its internal coordinate system. And since we're currently looking at the true north view, the building appears to be rotated, but if we select the view, the floor plan here, and we let's change the orientation to look at Project North, you can see that poof, the building is orthogonal because it's orthogonal to the internal coordinate system. And what we want to do, remember, we want to do all our positioning from this Project North view. So actually, for now, we're just going to leave this right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the building where I really want it to be. And I'm just going to take it and drag it over here. And notice at this moment, if I open the linked file, the survey point inside the house file would be at the startup location in that file, because I never moved it. But also at this moment, the position of the survey point relative to the house is correct in this file. I mean, this is the survey point, there's the house, it's correct relative to this survey point. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this fact change the fact that it's in the wrong position inside the house file by publishing the coordinate of the survey point to this linked file so that it is correct. On the other hand, if the position of the house relative to the survey point in the house file was already correct and the house was in the wrong position here, we could acquire the shared coordinate from the linked house and the house would just sort of jump to the right spot. At least I'm pretty sure that's the way it goes. Maybe it moves the survey point. I can't really remember right now. At any rate, we're going to hit publish. So let's go to manage. We'll go to coordinates. We'll say publish coordinates. And now we have to click on the link that we want to publish coordinates for. So I'm just going to click right here. And this dialog pops up. We're going to talk about it a little bit more presently, but for now we're just going to hit OK. And presto, just like that, the files now share their shared coordinates. So let's open the house file to see what happened. Let me come up here and choose the house file. The first thing that happens is we get this dialog box telling us that we have to unlink the house before we're allowed to open the house as independently. And that's fine. We'll just click yes, it'll unlink the file. Now we get this, it says it can't be undone, that's fine. Now we get this message saying that the current position has not been saved inside the house file. Revit doesn't actually save the new position of the survey marker inside of the linked file until you tell it to explicitly or until you answer save in this dialog box. So we'll go ahead and do that, and it'll update the linked file, update the house file. And now it'll give it a moment and it will open the house. And let's turn on our X-ray vision. And you can see right away that the survey marker has moved so that the house is now correctly positioned relative to the survey marker. And even True North has been updated. If we click on this, you can see that True North has been rotated. We're currently looking at a Project North up view, but we can change that to True North. The building rotates. Let's go back. Oops. I'm not sure why that's not letting me go back. I'll just undo. At any rate, we've got Project North up again. And now let's just close this file and go back to this site. We don't actually need to save any changes here. Now let's say that we don't actually want the building square to the property. Well, first we need to load it back up, so we need to reload the link. So let's open Managed Links. We'll click the house, click Reload. We had to unlink it because we wanted to open the file. And you may have heard that you should never rotate the house, you should always rotate the lot. And had we drawn the lot in the same file as our house, that would be true, because we wouldn't want to take the house out of orthogonality with the internal coordinate system. But that doesn't apply in this case. We're not rotating the house with respect to the project coordinates of the house. Rather, we're updating the position of the survey marker and the direction of true north in the linked house file. So if I just take the house and I rotate it, we get this new dialog box which tells us that the shared sites in the house file have changed and asks if we want to save them now. We'll go ahead and say yes, we want to save it right now. And if I go ahead and open up the house file again, then again I'll get that dialog box, which I'll say yes, yes. And turn on X-ray vision, and we can see that the survey point has moved again, and it has a new north. But the house is still oriented orthogonally to this file's internal project coordinate system, and it's still in the right place relative to the survey pen. Okay, let's close this file. Now let's say we want to have more than one house on the property. Let me reload these links again. Manage link, and reload. Well, you might think that the way to do that is to create a named position, to set up a new survey marker and simply link the file to this new survey marker, but that's wrong. Remember what I said earlier, in Revit there is only one real-world survey marker. So instead what you do is you create a named site in the linked file, and the named site allows you to move the survey marker to a new point in the file, indicating the new location of the house relative to the one and only real-world survey marker. So in order to do that, we can actually publish the same way we put this house here, we can actually do the same thing. So let's just bring in a new link of the house. We'll say insert link, go get the house. We get a warning stating that the house is already linked. That's fine. We really do want to get another one, so we'll say yes. And we have a new house, and we can just position it somewhere on our property. We'll rotate it, whatever. And now we'll publish the position of the house. Let's go to Manage Coordinates, Publish Coordinates. We're going to publish this instance. And let's take a closer look at this dialog box. Currently there's only one named site in the linked file. Normally there would be one called internal, but I actually renamed it to house 1. But let's duplicate it, and let's call the new one house 2. And we'll hit OK. And now we're done. And we're going to open the house file again and take a look and see what happens. So let's open the house file. Again, we're going to get these dialog boxes. And again, we're going to get this message saying that we have updated the house linked file. And do we want to actually save it? I'm going to say yes. All right, let's see what happened. Let's turn on our X-ray vision. Here's our survey marker. And we can see right now that the survey marker is in the correct spot to build a house as it would be built if the house were being built in spot 1. And what we can do is we can click on this name right here. We clicked on the survey marker. We can click on this name, and we can say, I want to see, whoops, I did that incorrectly. Let's click on house 2, hit make current, hit OK, and say I want to see where the survey marker would be if I were building house 2. So now the house hasn't moved in the internal project coordinates, but the survey point has been moved so that the house relative to the survey point is where it would be if this were the second house being built. So these named sites that you see here, they are not different pins. They're not different survey pins. They're actually the same survey pin moved to different positions relative to the house so that the house moves relative to the survey pin. I know that's a little confusing, but that's just the way it is. And that is a lot of talking, but I hope that now you have a much more firm understanding of these coordinate systems. And now let's talk about some ancillary issues. First, let's talk about clipped versus unclipped. And remember I said that when we moved the project base point, this point down here, let me select it. Oops, let me select it if I can. That I wanted it unclipped. What happens when you move it clipped? The answer is that it picks up the whole project and it moves it. Let me do that right now. I'm just going to drag the whole thing over here. I've clipped it, and I'm going to move it, and you're going to see the whole house is going to move. Everything is going to move except for the survey marker. Now, why would you want to do this? Let's say you've got this house plan placed 10 times on the lot. But for some reason you decide you want each and every one of those houses moved 10 feet forward. You have two choices. You could either adjust the position of each and every named location's survey point, named site's survey point, I should say. You could select everything on this page but the survey point and move it, or you can just pin the project marker to the page and move the entire project by 10 feet. Notice that when you do that, the coordinate annotations don't change. Let me zoom in here. So that says 7 inches by 21 feet, and I move this. They don't change. It's still 7 inches by 21 feet. So the builder still has the correct coordinates relative to this point. You're just moving this entire building relative to the survey points around it. And you're not just moving it relative to this survey point, you're moving it relative to all of the survey points. On the other hand, if the builder says he'd rather have a reference coming from this other corner, then instead you should unpin this point, move it over to the corner, and now these coordinates will refer to this, and nothing else changes. The houses in the lot plan are still all in exactly the same place, but when you print the sheets, they'll have these coordinates updated to be referring to the new project base point. So that's clipped versus unclipped for the project base point. If it's clipped, all the houses go along for the ride when you look at the when you reopen the site. So that's it for the project base point. Now let's say that some little monster comes along and kicks over the real world survey pin. So I still have, actually let's open that file. So let's say they knock over this survey pin right here. I still have a survey pin over in this corner that I can use, and in an ideal world I could unclip the survey pin in this corner. Let me do that. Let me select it. Oops. Unclip it. I could unclip it, and I could move it over here. Actually, let me bring those links back up. I could move this marker over here in an ideal world, and I could just use this position as my new pin. All of my positions would update, and everything would be grand. But unfortunately, as it turns out, that actually doesn't work, and it's really a bug inside of Revit. And I'll talk about how we can get around this bug later. What actually ends up happening, instead of doing what you would hope it would do, which is basically to update everything so that this was now correct, is that it moves the marker icon with respect to the shared coordinate system, updates these numbers that you see over here to reflect that fact, and then nothing else happens. Your spot coordinates don't change because they refer to the shared origin. The linked files don't change. Nothing changes except that the icon is moved, which is bad because nothing else is updated. In other words, you really shouldn't ever move the survey marker with it unclipped. And actually, this is currently referring to what is that referring to? Oh, to the project base point. So let me set it to shared. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Anyway, it's not really important. If I'll set this to reference the shared coordinate system, and you can see that when I move this marker, those numbers, they don't change at all, which is completely useless. So, why they did it this way is completely beyond me. I think it's a bug personally. Let me set this back to 0, 0, 0, and we'll clip it. So now the question is, what happens when you move it while it's clipped? Well, when you move it while it's clipped, you're actually moving the shared coordinate system origin. So let's say that you drew your house so that it is in the correct position relative to the survey pin in the house file, but it's in the wrong place on this site drawing. Maybe the survey point happens to be right on the corner of the building pad, and it was really hard to mess up in the house drawing. But along comes the surveyor and says, "Oops, I goofed. The pin is actually in another spot on the lot." So if we clip the survey point and we move it, you can see that all of the houses go along for the ride, and that's because the survey point is not moving inside of these linked files. The survey point's in the same spot in the file, and their position is always relative to this survey point. And we are moving that coordinate system around on this page. But all of this other stuff that I've drawn in here, it's all relative to the project coordinate system. And we're basically saying that the survey pin isn't there anymore. So I'm saying, okay, I'm going to move the marker over to this other pin, and notice that in the case of the kid knocking over the pin, this would be the wrong thing to do because now the houses have moved. This would only be the right thing to do if these houses were already correctly oriented to the survey marker in the linked file, and we just wanted to update where the survey pin actually was on this file, because maybe it wasn't in this corner. Maybe it turned out, he comes back and he says it's actually not on the corner of the property, it's actually set in by a foot or something like that. Then we could just update it and then everything would be correct. So as far as unclipping is concerned, the way that it should work, if anyone from AutoCAD is listening, is that it should not unclip from the shared coordinate system. What it should unclip from is the linked files. That is, when you move the survey point, it should always move the shared coordinate system. But when you unlink it, it should also update the survey markers in the linked files. That way I could just move the survey marker over to the other corner and my problem would be solved. So that begs the question, what do you do if some little monster comes over and he knocks over your survey pin? And the answer is that you first have to unlink these files. And the way you do that is you click this button over here and you hit Do Not Share Site of Selected Instance. And do that. You have to do that for every single linked item. And then you come and you grab your survey point and you move it. And now notice the houses don't move. They don't move because the coordinate systems are no longer shared, and so they're not with respect to this survey point anymore. And then once you've moved your survey point to the new survey pin, you just go into Manage, Coordinates, hit Publish Coordinates, and again you have to publish the coordinates to the houses just as we did before. So we'll call that one House 1. We'll say Publish Coordinates of House 2. and now it's been fixed. The kid knocked over this pin, but we're going to use this one instead. The coordinates are updated to refer to the new survey marker. Everything is exactly the way that it should be. And finally, when you look at these spot coordinates and spot elevations, you'll notice that you can select an option called relative when you're choosing the origin. And for spot coordinates, this causes the coordinate to refer to the startup point, which is, in my opinion, completely useless and also a bug. And I say that because of the way that spot elevations work. With spot elevations, you can select relative, and then you can choose a base, say the second floor, and all of your elevations will be reported relative to that base. Similarly, I suspect that there was supposed to be a way of choosing a base coordinate for spot coordinates such that the corner of a room, for instance, could be the base, and then you could show the coordinates of a door relative to the corner of the room. But it really is not very important because, as it turns out, plain old dimensioning works just fine for that purpose, and we really don't need any sort of relative spot coordinate. So why that's even an option, I don't know, but it's just a bug, I think. At any rate, that's it, the whole mess in a not-so-small nutshell, and I hope that clears up your confusion about the subject. And if it didn't, all I can say is watch it again and then maybe a third time and then ask on the forums to see if anybody can help you. Good luck.